delay. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Spartan Tool Procast, Episode 8, brought to you by the International Institute of Sewer and Pipe Cleaning, where you can send your technicians to a 2-day course, get them trained by the best in the business, get them certified as a drain cleaner, and you can visit those guys at www.sewerinstitute.com. I am Mike Sekach, and with me, as always, is Eric Boonstra.
Hey, guys.
And our lovely producer, Emily Simmons. Eric, Emily, how you guys doing today?
We're doing good, Mike. Sorry about that. Some technical difficulties today.
All right, Eric, you doing all right?
I'll let you know in about 5 minutes.
I want everybody to notice Eric and kind of his demeanor and everything. He looks like a dad getting ready to go to Home Depot, doesn't he? He's ready to work. So,
Hey,
yeah.
maybe extra bitch.
I know. Hey guys, so we got a special episode today. I'm super excited about it. But before we jump into episode 8, Emily, why don't you recap episode 7 for our viewers?
Sure. Episode 7, we did cabling for roots. Mike had a 1065 and a pipe setup and demonstrated proper use of that and good safety techniques. So you can check that out on our Facebook page and on YouTube.
Yeah, thank you, Em. Tell you what, last week was fun, exciting for me. Another chance to get my hands on a 1065. That is definitely my go-to machine, my favorite one. So episode 8, we got Eric Boonstra, who is going to demonstrate power feed maintenance. So he's going to go through all the ins and outs on how to rebuild the short block and the long block for us. Eric's probably rebuilt hundreds of these over the years. So without further ado, Eric, the floor is yours.
I love it. All right. Thanks. Hey, everybody. Glad everybody's here today. So, hey, first thing we're going to do, obviously, we're going to talk about rebuilding the power feed, as Mike said. This is something that our TMs get a lot in the field. So we thought that this would be a good episode to do, and we've had a lot of requests for training. We get a lot of requests for training at the Institute when we're doing that, especially maintaining the machines. So we've got a power feed on a 300, and this 300 is just come into us. So this is straight out of the field. We don't know what we're going to get, so that's kind of the exciting part. So hey, the first thing we're going to do, we're going to glove up, and we're going to do safety as always. So we're going to do proper PPE and put on some safety glasses, and we're going to get started here. So I've got a few tools. I'll point out real quick just a few tools that we're going to need for this. I've got a 1/2 inch and a 9/16 ratcheting box wrench. The ratcheting box wrench is like that was like life altering for me. That thing is awesome. Got a straight screwdriver, got a pick, got a little punch, some grease, brush, file hammer, needle nose, channel lock, set of pliers. Got some WD-40. You could use a parts cleaner, whatever your go-to is for cleaning up parts. Got a little bit of emery cloth. We got some shop towels. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take this feed off of this unit real quick.
And everybody notice blue channel locks, right, Eric?
These are the only channel locks. These are the only channel locks they make, isn't it? I didn't know.
In my tool bag, Eric, I probably had a couple 6-in-1s and about 12 different blue channel locks.
Yeah,
that's all I needed.
I don't believe in much else. So, all right, just like that, I loosen the swing bolts up, pop the feed off. We'll talk about putting that on at the end here. So, as you can see, this power feed, like I said, this thing is come from the field. So we're going to get started taking this thing apart real quick. Got my 1/2 inch and 9/16 box wrench, 1/2 inch on the hex head bolt in the back, 9/16 on the acorn up front. So I'm just going to undo these all real quick.
Hey, Emily, while Eric's doing that, great new feature about our website is our breakdowns of our machines and our units. Can we go ahead and put a link up there for our viewers where they can find this power feed breakdown diagram?
Absolutely. I'll get it up in just a sec.
So I just took the universal mounting plate off, and depending on the machine you're using, you're going to have a couple of hex head bolts that are going to be longer than the others. So you want to pay attention as you take this apart as to where those bolts came from. It'll just make it easier going back on. If you're working on a 2001, it does not have a universal mounting bracket. It bolts straight into the frame of the machine, into the lower casting. So you're going to use a little longer bolt in order to get into that casting. Pull that long block out of there real quick.
Yeah, so just so everybody knows, you're going to have two short blocks that are going to have your roller bearing feed assembly in there, and then your top one's going to be your long block. That long block has a spring and a handle on it, so Eric will probably start with the short block, and then we'll move on to the top block.
That's right. Yeah, so like I said, it might be a little hard to see in the camera here, but this bolt in my left hand was the first bolt that I took out. And if you look, you can see that it's about 3/8 of an inch longer. So that's going to go back in on the top on that long block when we put that together. So I'm going to set those two aside and make sure that I've got those separate so I don't confuse those with the other bolts. So the fundamentals of power feeder are really simple. You've got 4 plates that make up a total of 4 plates, red plates that make up the power feed, plus the actuator handle and the blocks themselves. So I'm going to pop this apart. Here's your actuator handle assembly. Get this little washer out of the way. You've got the ring with your decals on it for forward, reverse, neutral. You've got the spacer ring in the back. Then you've got your blocks. These are both short blocks. They've got the decals on them for cable settings. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then you've also got 2 more blocks that are identical, or 2 more discs that are identical to the front ones. So you could literally build this thing backwards. You really can't screw these plates up. The only thing that makes it different is the back plate doesn't have the forward, reverse, neutral decal on it like the front one does. Beyond that, these plates are identical. So as you can see, this it's got all the good stuff on it. It's been in the field, it's been used. So we're going to take that apart. There's a couple pieces that we'll go over here. Now I've got some new parts and pieces laid out on this white sheet of paper to make it a little easier to see. And these are all parts that are on the block right now. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to take this long-handled screwdriver, and I'm just going to go through here real quick. And I'm going to get as much of just the debris off as I can, just to make it a little easier to work with. So as we take this apart, the one thing that's helpful is that if you've got a vise in the shop, if you do this in the shop, you definitely want to have a vise. I'm going to very carefully, I've got this wrapped in a shop rag. I'm just going to put a little light tension on there, and we've got a clip. These clips, you can see that clip. I won't tell you what we call them, but usually it's whatever you say when you lose something. It's an old blank clip. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this flat bladed screwdriver, and it's pretty thin. It actually fits. It actually fits right in that part of the clip there. So it's a small enough blade that I can get it between the pin and the clip. I'm just going to give it a little twist, and I'm going to keep a finger there just to keep that from flying away on me. I had that happen to customers.
Well, Eric did that a lot easier than I've done it in the past. Guys, this is probably the most crucial
not
probably the
kidding.
most critical step is making sure that, you keep that clip or you find that clip if you don't have an extra one. So, if you're doing it in the back of your truck or doing it in the yard, I would not recommend that.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to, like I say, a vise and just something to try to catch that clip. So I've got that apart now. Like I said, this thing we literally just took this apart for the first time. I wasn't sure what I was going to get. So I'm just going to go in here, clean this out real quick. It's, gummed up. It's seen lots of cabling action, obviously. So I'm getting out I took the feed washer out, the two stainless washers. I pulled those out. What I want to do is just take something with a flat edge like this screwdriver, and I want to clean as much of this stuff off of this short block as I can real quick. And there's no set of right or wrong tools. I mean, anything that you can use that makes your life easier when it comes to doing this is going to be helpful. So now I like WD-40. Like I said, you guys can use brake cleaner, parts cleaner, whatever you want to use, whatever makes life easier for you. In the bottom of this, in the bottom of the block here, you can see we had a thrust race, which is just, these are just flat washers. There's two of these in each block. We have a thrust bearing. There's lots of little tiny bearings in this. So what I'm looking for when I take that apart is I'm usually looking, these are usually down to about nothing. Sometimes they're not even there anymore. They wear out, they might get sloppy and loose. If they fall out, it's definitely something to replace, but for the cost involved, I just always recommend replacing them anyway. Now, the bottom washer, the bottom thrust race is in there, and it's being stubborn. So you can tap it on your vise. This pick usually helps. Sometimes if the pick won't cooperate, try to get in there with a screwdriver. This one's really, there it goes. It's just catching the right edge, and then it'll come. So we've got that out. Now the block is clean. So I'm going to take my WD-40. The other thing I'm going to do is just take a shop rag and try to wipe down as much of the outside of it as you can. I mean, when I was doing this for my customers, I just always want it to look pretty when I'm done. Maybe that's just me being a little ridiculous, but I'm going to just squirt some WD-40 on this and get it soaking a little bit in here. I'm going to do that to the wheel, and start cleaning this off real quick. So WD-40 takes it off pretty good. Some people might ask, like, when's the time to clean this? Well, if it doesn't work smooth and easy like a brand new feed, it probably needs to be clean. A lot of guys say, they'll call and say my power feed stiff, it doesn't want to turn or it won't feed. Some guys will say it'll feed out but it won't feed in. That's usually related to a setting, and we'll try to cover that and go over that here and talk about the settings on the power feed.
Hey, Eric.
Right.
One question that we get asked very often is, if you're pulling back tree roots or feminine products, any foreign matter that's on your cable, do you recommend pulling that matter through the power feed, or are you cutting that matter off before you bring it through the power feed?
I'd never be bringing anything back through the power feed. I mean, you don't really want anything getting in that power feed that would be anything other than just whatever wastewater is really coming back on it. Frankly, in my opinion, you're just gonna make things hard on the feed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would not. That would not be one of my go-to items. So while while this wheel carrier is soaking, I'm going to spray it one more time. I'm going to start on this long block and show you guys the difference in the long block. So I'm going to let that sit for a minute. The long block, as you can see, this is your dial adjustment. So we've got a spring on there. I'm going to grab my needle nose pliers. And I'm just going to get it down here. You can see where that spring comes up underneath the coupling there, the end of the pin.
Yeah.
I'm just going to grab that, pull it off with a pin like that. Quite often those springs will break, and what the spring does is it helps draw everything back up when you're loosening that. So that's if we need to replace that, that'll be easy. Now the long block is a little different. You've got a bushing and ball assembly, which is what this is. We've got a new one. We got a new one here. You've got a spring. Now these springs are rock hard. They're super hard. I can't compress this with my hand, but that's in there as well. I can't tell you that I've ever had to replace one of these, but I always do take it apart and give it a good cleaning. So I'm going to set these in there too. And again, I'm just real quick, I'm going to do what I did with the first one. This has got more grease on. The second one has some more grease on it than what the first one did. So I'm going to wipe that off real quick. I'm just going to put this in the vise again. And say just enough pressure to hold that is all you really need. And again, all I'm doing is twisting the blade against that. It'll give a little pop against your finger. If your finger wasn't there, I guarantee that thing's going shooting across the shop, the parking lot, or wherever you're at. Like I was saying a minute ago, I did that in a customer's driveway one year down in Evansville, Indiana, and it was a gravel driveway. I spent a half hour looking for it, but I'm here to tell you, and I'm happy to report that I found it. So, because I don't think I had any on the truck that particular day. So same thing, just going to look, I'm going to inspect this bearing. It's a little sloppy. Definitely is a good candidate for replacing. If the bearing has a good solid feel to it, there's no real need to go replacing it. But again, if Mike, you want to talk about the do's and the don'ts in terms of how much we need to tighten down a power feed while I clean this up real quick?
Yeah, so last week we had touched on it when I was operating a 1065 here at the shop. Hand tight, guys. I mean, we want to make sure as soon as that power feed knob starts to get snug, you can turn the machine on. Have the power feed knob in neutral. Turn it on, and you can kind of gauge how fast it's coming out. Again, Eric and I have been to job sites where we've seen technicians take channel locks to it. That's a problem. Typically, what you're going to find is that when Eric will show you, those bearings should be nice and round. What will happen is you're going to get some flat spots that'll wear in those bearings from too much pressure. Now, what's going to happen if you have too much pressure on there? That bearing is going to blow itself out. Once you have one bearing that blows out, that power feed is useless until you replace that. So again, don't tighten that knob down too often. Don't take channel locks to it. If you have to take channel locks to it, there's a problem. If you can't get that figured out, you can always reach out to one of your territory managers. We'll come out and take a look at it for you. But you're only doing more harm than good at that point.
Yeah, guys, the power feed will feed up to approximately 35 feet per minute max. So there's no need to over tighten that, because there is a point of diminishing return where you're just not doing anything anymore. You're not achieving any value, any result in doing that. So I'm just going to scrape a little more out of here, just to try to get it cleaned up. Because like I said, I want these things looking good for my guys, my customers, when I'm out there doing this. So it doesn't even hurt if you have a little toothbrush or a little wire brush, anything to get in there. Will help get that clean. You don't want anything that buildup will interfere with the ability of the bearing to turn as well. So we don't want that. We want that nice and clean.
And also what can happen is last week when we showed you how easily that those bearing blocks moved on the bottom once that power feed knob is loosened up, well, what's going to happen is you get so much gunk and grit and everything else that gets down inside that block, you'll never be able to adjust that knob. We've seen guys take hammers, 3-pound sledgehammers trying to beat on it to get it again. If you have to beat on your power feed, there's a problem. Keep those things nice and clean. I mean, Eric, what's the recommended time? I mean, we would do it about every month where we would take our power feeds apart, and we have some guys that do it yearly. I mean, what's your recommendation?
Yeah, it's kind of, guys ask the same, kind of the same line of questioning, Mike, when they talk about how long should my cable last? And for me, the answer is always arbitrary. It's really, a lot of it is dependent on the operator. A guy that takes good care of his machine and treats it well, cleans it up and wipes it down every time, and is good on his cable, knows when to back off, knows what the cable's saying to him, the cable's talking to him. If you're good like that, it's going to last a long time. But from a performance or from a preventative maintenance program, I would say at least every 2 to 3 months, and maybe every month, just depending on how much service your machine is seeing. If you're getting out there and you're getting in a lot of nasty lines, and it's tough going, look at the machine. I mean, you can see, if you get this kind of junk and buildup, and this one's actually better than the first one we took apart. If you've got that on your machine, it's probably a good idea to stop and clean it up at least once a month. But 2 to 3 months, every 90 days, for me, that's about as far as I'd want to go out without getting after it and maintaining it. Take care of your machine, guys. It's your moneymaker. You're out there at midnight, your machine goes down, you ain't got a power feed. Pushing that by hand is going to be a what. So take care of you. It's going to take care of you. That's always kind of been my philosophy. So I've wiped down both this long block and this short block, and I'm pretty happy with them. So I'm going to set these aside. One thing I want to show you before I clean this other long block up is I'm looking at the barrel on this block, and then you see some fine scratches on the wheel carrier, on this wheel carrier here. I know I said block, but this wheel carrier. If it's really bad, and this one's like borderline, just some fine emery cloth. For you guys that are still doing copper out there, you got some emery cloth on the truck, good enough. It doesn't have to be super aggressive because this is aluminum, so I don't want to get crazy with it. But again, the more you can do, more you can clean it up, shine it, and get it down to a nice clean surface, the better off you are. Has always kind of been my philosophy there. So this block's a little older. Our newer blocks, I'll show you. This is a newer wheel carrier. You'll notice that that's got a groove in it. This is definitely an older feed. It does not have this groove. If you've got a newer carrier, newer power feed, and by newer, 5 years, 6 years, that's the first time I haven't seen one without these O-rings in a long time. So if yours had it, shove this on here real quick. That O-ring sits in there. The purpose of that O-ring, the improvement, was to help prevent a lot of foreign debris from getting down into the block, between the block and the carrier here. And that helped keep that aluminum from getting scoured up like that. But this one's in remarkably good shape for not having those. I'm going to change gloves real quick. So I'm just going to clean up this other one real quick, and then we can start putting some stuff back together. We might go a little long here, guys. We're not going to get the whole thing rebuilt, but I do want to go through some steps on reassembling. This process, if you've never done it, this could take you hour and a half. Usually if I'm not talking my way through it, I can do one in about 45 minutes to an hour, just depending on the overall condition of everything. So, and whether or not my hands sweating with these gloves. So, all right, so I'm going to clean this last carrier real quick. And guys, if you're interested in this, if you're wanting to do your own, we will have a kit available so you can get all the basic parts and pieces that you would need. And those are the most consumable parts. Like I said, this longer spring here and the bushing and ball assembly, this little piece, those hardly ever go bad. Unless something's gone seriously wrong with the feed, those don't necessarily need replacing. But everything else that I'm showing you, the feed bearing, these stainless washers, if somebody takes this apart, those washers are small, they tend to get lost. But definitely these thrust washers, the thrust bearings, those are definitely something that I'm going to recommend replacing every time, just for the life and the performance of the feed. So, okay. All right, so we've got that put back together. So reassembly, this can sometimes be the trick. We're going to start with the long block, the barrel, the wheel carrier for the long block. Again, I'm going to just put it back in the vise a little bit. I'm going to take my pin, my drive pin, one of my drive pins. And what I want you to notice, guys, and I'll show you here, the drive pin has hexed sides on it. You can see there. And it has you've got a flat there. So when I put this in there, I want that hexed flat to end up sitting there. If you get it in and it's like that, or you can see that gap there, you're not all the way through on this side, and you're never going to get the clip in there. So you want to watch how that goes back together. So got our feed bearings. This over here and get this ready. There's
now, Eric, I asked last week, what kind of grease are you using today?
So we're using a blue lithium grease. It's an all-purpose, multi-purpose, extreme pressure lithium complex. So it's automotive, industrial. Any kind of axle grease will do good for that. But this is what we use here in the shop. So, but I want to get this part put back together first. So the trick here, I push my drive pin up a little bit, and I get that first stainless washer on there. I'm going to take my next feed bearing, and I'm going to get the feed bearing in place, and I'm just going to push it on up through. Now I've got my next trick here, and this is where the screwdriver comes in handy again. Actually, I'm just going to use this little pick. You line the flat washer back up in there, push all the way through, and you know when you've pushed all the way through, you got it. So I'm going to set this up right here now because it'll be a little easier to put that clip back in. There's my clip. So take the flat edge of the screwdriver, just push that back down on there. Sometimes it's easier said than done. There it goes. Got that snapped in there good. So we're all done. We got that on there. See that? Now, if I'm going to put this back together in the block, I'm just going to take my grease. First thing I'm going to do, where did I put it? There we go. My short block, or sorry, my long block. That's what we're working on. Take my long block, get some grease on here. I'm just going to grease up the inside of this. Nice and good. Get that greased up. Now, like I said, there's no thrust or race washers in there. I'm going to Put a little bit of grease on my big spring. Again, this just helps everything, keeps everything lubricated and everything turning the way it should. And then we'll put that back in there last. That takes care of that. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to brush nice even coat of grease on the outside of that carrot. We're going to push that in there. So now when we push this back in here like this, what I want you to notice is where the ball on this pin is in relationship to the shape of the block. You've got not as deep a throat on this side, and you've got a deeper throat on this side. The ball is always going to go into the deeper portion of the throat on this block. That's what we want on all of the blocks. So do this one real quick. So again, just going to get some grease in here. Grease up the inside of this real good. You got any questions out there today, Em?
I don't see any right now.
That's good. I must be doing it right.
No, but Brian Elliott did put the part number for those clips. So, Brian, thanks for sharing that.
That's probably helpful. Thanks, Brian. On my races, I always just kind of get my fingers in there and just get after it. Get a little bit of grease on each side of that. I've already put one of the thrust washers in there, so we're just making a sandwich. Thrust washer, thrust bearing, and another thrust washer. You're good to go there. So we're going to take our short block now. We're going to throw it back together real quick. Okay, and again, do this again. Kevin, I don't know if you can get in any tighter than what we are, but so basically coming from the bottom, I'm just going to line up the end of that pin right as it comes in the hole there. It might be tough to see, but get that first stainless washer on there, slide the bearing in, and get your, just go down again to the face of the bearing, slide this stainless washer in, just line it up with a hole. That pin should feed up through, and you're good to go. Take your clip.
He's just getting cocky now, Emily. He's throwing it in my face.
Yeah, it's not.
It makes it look so easy.
Yeah, I don't know. Thanks, everyone. Let's get the clip back in here first, and then we can say that because it's not always as easy. These clips can be a little. There it goes. Just be careful you don't poke yourself in the finger with this, guys. The safety again is paramount because remember you're dealing with a product that's been in a sewer line. You've got it clean, but I don't trust that for nothing. So always be mindful of that and be safe as you're putting these things back together, taking them apart. Again, it's just nice even coat of grease on here. I'm going to put a little bit on the bottom because as you notice, the bottom of the short barrel is solid and the long barrel is hollow because that's got that spring in there. So now that's not going back in. Why is that not going back in? I don't know what's wrong with it. Well, I'll tell you what's wrong with it. When you look at this, pay attention to where the handle for the feet is at. You want to make sure that that's pulled all the way back. Should have about 1/4 of an inch of reveal there when that pulls back through. So if your block doesn't go all the way back in there, that's probably why. So make sure that goes back in all the way like that. All right, one quick thing before we start throwing this back together, that spring. Again, I'm just going to take my needle, no pliers. Sorry, I got off screen there. I'm just going to take this and I'm going to pull it back down, put it around it. Again, what that's going to do is as I turn that handle down, you can see the end of that move, and the spring helps pull that back. So if it's not pulling back, probably time to replace that spring. Is definitely a consumable part. So, all right. So we're going to start throwing this back together here real quick. I'm going to start with my plates. Now remember, this cutout here matches the cutout from the front on this front ring. So that's going to be the top on the back side. These holes are lined up at different angles. So you basically just got to kind of slide this around until you find the set of holes that match up. Now, from a standpoint of putting this back together, we know that at the top I had my two long ones. So I'm going to put my two long bolts back in here first. Get that. And then it doesn't matter which one goes next. They're all the same. Now, I usually grab these, just grab all of them, because when you turn this over, they're going to want to fall out. So the easiest way to do that is to get that laying back upside down and make it look easy in the plant here, because they use a plate that holds everything. We're not that lucky in the field. So.
I don't know, you made that look pretty easy.
Not my first rodeo. So if I can do it, anybody can do it, especially a guy with a dad bod at Home Depot, right, Mike?
That's why he used so much WD-40, Emily. He's probably just needed an excuse to go back to Home Depot.
Well, you know, I'm really shameless plugs here, so I'll stop. All right. In the interest of time, we didn't clean this one, but we're gonna throw them back together. I'm gonna just brush this off a little bit. Okay. Again, remember, we don't want the ball of that pin on the shallow side. We want the ball of that pin on the deep side. So I'm going to put that on there. Here I am thinking about it. Thinking about it. Going this way. Okay, we'll get there. All right, same thing. Throw this one. No, not the same thing. Guys, the thing I'm struggling with, I want you to see, is this decal. You got a decal on one side and you don't have a decal on the other. So what you want to do is make sure that when you put this back together, that decal is going to be someplace where you're going to see it when the power feed is upright. Remember, the handle point towards me right now is the top side. So I want this decal to be facing to the top side. So my decals are going to be facing me if I'm standing in the position I am now. Otherwise, you're going to look at that when you get it all back together and you're going to go, crap, I got to take it apart. So again, I'm going to line these up. Now this part's just a little trickier. I want to make sure that find my alignment here. It's going to be the bottom. This should be it right here. That's it. Okay, so for the handle, you want the balls are going to fall between these grooves that are in the power feed. So here's the front. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the feed. I'm going to feed the handle from the back side of these plates. Back side of the plates coming through. Going to set that there. Just going to set this down on there. All three of these. Go to the neutral position. So straight up on the handle. That will guarantee that these grooves match the orientation of the balls on the end of those pins. I'm going to just sort of feed everything down onto it. Should be good. Put my washers back on here. Now I did screw one thing up, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to universal mounting bracket back on there. So even though that's off of there, got just enough loose pressure on there that I can actually put that back together without everything falling apart on me. So on your newer feeds, you'll see that or your newer universal mounting brackets, you're going to see that there's actually 2 holes. You want to go in the bottom set of holes when you put that back together. Don't be confused by that. Let's slide that through there. Figure out what I did with my last acorn. There it is. Okay. All right. Now again, you don't have to go crazy on this. We're just gonna snug these down. Don't have to do it in any particular pattern. It's not like putting a wheel and lug nuts back on. You can set this up in the vise too if it's easier for you, whatever your preference is. And again, if I was doing this, I just take the time to clean the whole thing. All right, so we talked about this decal. Before I slap that back on the machine, we talked about this decal and we talked about setting the cable. I want to show you a new feed. This will be part of the kit for you guys too. You notice the difference here. We've gone to a knob now where we have this star pattern with all the cable sizes on it and this little pin on there. We've gone to a knob, so there's really no more guessing anymore. So if you want to set this, what you're going to do is you're going to push in, get that out of the way. You push in and you simply turn to where you want to be. So when you look down now and you see and you look up, this arrow lines up. That's the 13/32 setting. So if I was doing the other side, I want to make sure that's back there. I'm going to push this up. I'm going to turn that to 13/30. They just need to match. If they don't match, you can have issues potentially with a bearing wearing out prematurely, with some feed issues with the cable, not feeding properly. So you want to make sure that your cable sizes match. So on this one, what I tell people too is if this is the style you have, you want to think of this as the face of a clock. You have every position, if you notice, besides 12 and 6. So if I push in and turn just one click, I know that I'm set to 5/8 and 6/6 on here. So this orientation here equals out to the orientation here. You want this to match what this decal is doing. I hope that makes sense. But think about the sticker here being on the face of this part of the block. And you just match those up. Do that on both sides and you'll be set. So one final thing as we wrap this up, on a 300 in particular, 300 has this little block on the back side of it that correlates with this groove here on the drum. So a lot of guys will call into us and say, hey, my machine keeps riding off. Well, this groove or this notch on this block has to jive with that groove on the drum. And you want to make sure that the drum is pushed all the way back onto the machine. And when you put this back together, you want that block. Once that's back all the way, I'm just going to snug this down by hand just a second. If I didn't have it where I needed it to be, I would grab a socket and I would loosen these 2 hex head screws up here. I'd push my drum all the way back and get it seated against the clutch. And then I would tighten these down. Now, another thing that I had an old timer teach me is I'd take that little scratch awl that I had there and I would scratch a line or take a super fine tip marker or even a pencil or something, and I would make a mark on the back side of this universal mounting bracket across plate here. And if I see that that's moving, it's going to tell me that I need to change the adjustment on that and get that back to where it needs to be, because it tells me that my clutch is not probably seated, the drum's not seated back all the way against the clutch. So that's one hot tip I can give you to maintaining your 300, because we get that a lot. So, well, guys, that's the long and the short of busting down a power feed and throwing her back together. We went a little quick. I'd like to get it a little more cleaner than that, but for the sake of consideration of time, we wanted to just show you real quick. So, Mike, that's all I got, buddy.
Awesome. Eric, great demonstration on how to break the power feed down. Honestly, when I first came into Spartan Tool, one of the first TMs I met was Eric, actually down in Evansville at a trade show, and he's definitely helped me out along the way. And Eric actually did my training on the power feed. So nobody better to ask than Eric Boonstra on that. So again, Emily had put the link up for our power feed breakdown, right, Em?
Yes, I did. It's in the comments.
Awesome. So you guys can find that. And again, you guys ever have any questions, concerns, please feel free to reach out to any one of us or reach out to one of your territory managers. So with that, Emily, what do we got on the plate for next week?
Next week, we're going to have another Meet the Team episode. We're going to be talking to Jason Roby, one of our territory managers. And Mike, correct me, he's in Missouri area, right?
Kansas City.
He's kind of everywhere now, so it'll be nice to get Jason on and kind of clarify that. Jason's got a Spartan Tool Facebook group that's pretty lively, so should be a good episode next week. I know we wanted to break it up a little bit. We've done a few demos and trainings, and Eric and I need a week off, so it'll be nice to get Jason on here. So, Eric, again, thank you. Eric, Em, you guys have any closing thoughts?
I'm worn out. That's it. That's all I got.
I can do this now, so.
Well, you are a certified drain cleaner, so.
Right. All right, guys. Well, listen, great episode. Look forward to talking to you again next week. So with that, I hope everybody has a nice, relaxing weekend. Sewer Raiders, signing off.
Stay safe, guys.